Yo, what is poppin' YouTube? Dom Richie here, back on the Shuffle Squad YouTube channel, and today I'm going to be going over my far too early Pokemon TCG 2024 World Championships tier list. Now, this does cover some of the newer decks coming out of Shrouded Fable, and we will be talking a little bit about some of the cards we're going to be including in these decks that maybe have already been pretty refined, right? So we're going to be talking about like Charizard with Dusknoir and some other cool additions that you guys might have been thinking about. So lock in here and let's get this video underway. Let's see what the tier list is about and let's see how wrong I am in a few months. Alrighty, so this is what we've cooked up in terms of some of the top decks going into this event. This is about 30-ish decks that I'm like, yeah, I think all these are decks we have to have in our minds, decks we have to think about. Now, some of them we don't have to think about as much because they just aren't that great right now, but others it's like, these are probably a little too slept on. So let's just jump right into it, and obviously I am starting with Charcadet here. Now, I think this deck probably a little bit too slow for the current meta. I think it's still a fine play. Like, I'm not going to put it in tier 3 because I think it's still relatively good, right? But I think tier 2.5 is probably fine. The meta's a little hostile right now. You've got cards like Turbo Hands, cards like Miraidon playing Iron Hands, Raging Bolt destroys your Arceus, and in general, like, you're just not looking amazing into so many of the top matchups. Greninja's here, it's one-shotting your Arceuses. Lost Zone Box, I think, is probably pretty good, but like, if they can set up early enough and just start killing all your bench Pokemon, you're not having a great day. In general, like, it's probably just not the play. Chien-Pao is also on the rise, so I think in general, Archark, probably keep it not in your play zone. Just for right now, I just don't think it's that great. Arctina is another deck. Maybe it's okay. I think it's probably around Archark in that tier 2.5. Like, if you know it really well, if you play it a lot, it's probably fine. But like I said, it's really hostile right now. You're kind of a slower deck, especially like if you miss attack on turn 1 and you're just screwed, right? That's not where we want to be. In general, like, I think Arceus decks are probably not that great, but I will be going over just Arceus control, and that's just what this Arceus is. And I actually think Arceus control with Xerosic gets much better than it currently is. I actually like really think Arc Control is a very, very strong deck. Like, if you could go Xerosic and then Luxray, your opponent's trainer, out of their hand, like, you're probably looking really good. So I do think that Babero might start seeing a little bit more play with the rise of Xerosic. In general, like, I think Arc Control is probably a tier 2 deck. It might be up in tier 1.5 later. We'll have to see what happens when Shrouded Fable does release. That's still about a month away here, but I think that Arc Control is probably going to be better. It's probably the best Arceus variant to be playing going into this event. Now, a deck that I probably wouldn't play is Banette. Now, I know you did get Xerosic, but I think Xerosic is probably just not, like, probably not that great because it means you're not taking knockouts with Poltergeist ever. In general, like, I think Banette is one of those decks I'm probably just steering clear from. Just so many decks have ways to get around Banette. So many decks have ways that they can just take knockouts even without taking items. And in general, like, you're a little bit clunky. Like, the deck, I just think the deck is not functionally all there, but I think it's probably like you're okay to play it if you really want to. I wouldn't play it to Worlds, especially like I'm not flying to Honolulu to go play Banette EX, so I'm probably just not thinking about it, right? Probably not on my radar. I'm probably not even thinking about testing against it. But a deck that I am probably thinking about a decent amount, but not like a huge amount, is probably Blissey. I think Blissey, even though it has seen no actual tournament success, I think Blissey is a deck that it just needs to be figured out, right? Your ability to Charon's Care Loop with Monkey Dory is really, really good. And I think that, like, 180, while it's not great, if you can move 60 damage with Monkey Dories, that's 240. That's knocking out a lot of stuff. You do have to have that double turbo, unfortunately, most of the time, because that does mean you're only doing 220, which is still knocking out stuff like a Chien-Pao or a Grass Ogerpon, but most cards are a little bit higher than that. Most decks aren't swinging that 200 or that 400 damage when you have that Hero's Cape, so you're looking pretty good there. And especially with Sharon's Care, I think you're probably okay. And with the rise of like decks like Charizard, decks like Dragapult, I could see Blissey finding its spot a little bit more. But in general, right now, I'm thinking it's probably still a tier 2.5 deck. Do I see it potentially being a lot better than it is right now? Yes, absolutely. But right now, I think we have to wait and see. Blissey's got a lot to prove before I can put it any higher. Miraidon is definitely a deck that I'm really excited for. I think Miraidon is going to be very good going into this upcoming like world championships, right? We have seen a lot of Lost Box doing well, a lot of Gardevoir doing well. So I think Miraidon is just kind of one of those decks. It might just be the play. And in general, like your ability to use Iron Hands, your ability to swing pretty much every single turn on turn 1 is really, really good. And in general, like I think Miraidon is well positioned. It's probably tier 1.5. I'm not going to be putting it in tier 1. Tier 1 is like, this is what I'm playing if I'm trying to win the event. I could see this doing really, really good. So that's kind of just where I've put Miraidon for right now, is that tier 1.5-ish area. Dragapult is probably also up in that tier 1.5. I think Dragapult is probably really, really good. Your Lost Box matchup, I think, is probably good. It's kind of tough because there's so many different ways to play Dragapult. I actually think regular Dragapult might be a tier 2 deck because I just think Lost Zone Dragapult is better. I think it does so much more, and I think that's what's really important. Dragapult also uses Psychic Energies, so it has good synergy with Sableye. And in general, like I think Dragapult is probably good. I just don't think it's great, but I do think Lost Zone Dragapult is really great. It might be up in tier 1. We'll have to see what actually happens when Shrouded Fable releases. Getting a little bit closer to Worlds, we will be redoing this tier list, and I'll compare the two of them. And we'll kind of be like, wow, haha, that was a horrible take, or wow, that was a pretty good take. I guess we'll have to wait and see. Espathra's another deck. Probably not playing Espathra. It's like, there's so many ways to play around Espathra. I'm taking 1 more energy to attack is probably okay, but Charizard's not that big, and even Charizard can play around Espathra, right? And there's just a lot of decks that I'm like, don't really know how great they are for Espathra. So I think Espathra is probably going to stay in this tier 3 area for me right now. It's just not seeing a lot of online play even right now. When Shrouded Fable comes out, it'll probably see a little bit more just because of Okidogi and all the other dark types coming into play. But I think like in general, Espathra probably isn't the play for Worlds. Now a deck that I think is still very, very strong is that Gardevoir EX. Now Gardevoir does kind of just everything. It can snipe a bench, it can take huge one-hit knockouts, it can play the slow game, it can control your board a little bit. In general, like I think Gardevoir is just kind of that deck right now. So I've kind of got to put it like up in that tier 1, and I think it's very, very strong. I think there's not a lot that decks can really do against a Gardevoir, because like it just kind of sets up, like there's nothing that I'm like, you're hard countering Gardevoir playing this. Even Iron Thorns, like they can get around that, not easily, but it's not the most difficult thing ever, right? Like they just promote the Flutter, they retreat with it. After they attach all their energies, they blow up your Iron Thorns. 2 prizes there, 2 prizes, 2 prizes, 2 prizes. So I think Gardevoir is probably a really solid tier 1 deck right now. Then we do have Greninja here. Greninja is probably in tier 3, unfortunately. I just don't think Greninja is great. It's kind of got the Arceus problem where it's a little bit too slow. It doesn't do a lot. It's probably be in the same spot as Rapid Strike if Rapid Strike was in this meta, where like just doesn't do enough that it's really warranted to play. So I'm kind of putting Greninja over in tier 3. It takes so many bad matchups into the meta, and it's really, really slow and inconsistent, so I cannot put it any higher than tier 3. Probably keep Greninja off your radar. It's probably not seeing any success. But a deck that is probably okay is Quad Iron Thorns. I'm going to put it in tier 2.5 here, probably below Blissey though. Quad Iron Thorns is, well, it's just shutting off your opponent's abilities. It's a little bit slow if you miss that Turbo Energize turn 1. And there's a lot of decks that can kind of just play around it, right? I think that if your opponent isn't playing Roblox Pokemon, you're probably not having a good time. Like Lost Box is probably a little bit scary, especially like when they start getting some of these new attackers, especially like if they've got Iron Moth, right? Or not Iron Moth. What's the other one called? Slitherwing. Yeah. Slitherwing probably makes it a little bit hard. Maybe they're going to start playing fighting types just to start dealing with this Miraidon problem, with this Iron Thorns problem, the Iron Hands problem. I think they might just start playing fighting types. We'll have to wait and see what's going on over there. But I think in general, like Iron Thorns probably is, it's a play, but it's probably not a great one, right? And then we've got this Kingdra EX here, and Kingdra, it did just win a Japan event. I did see that, but I still think Kingdra's probably bad. You're a stage 2 that needs to be set up. Yeah, you can put water Pokemon onto your bench, but then you got to get them in your discard pile. And in general, like your attack, there's definitely better attacks. I think Chien-Pao is probably just better Kingdra. Now, Kingdra is really cool because like you could just place 2 Excalibur and just safety your whole board, and you only need 1 rare candy. That's pretty cool, but Kingdra, it's not really beefy enough that I'm really saying, yeah, it's fine to just sit in the active spot. Like, it has a lot of health, but I'm not sitting here like, this is a perfectly fine card that can take a lot of damage, and you're probably only taking 1 knockout, and you got a rare candy again. So it's not that great. Lost Zone Tina, I think Lost Zone Tina is fine. Like, probably just like tier 2 fine. Probably just around like 10, like number 10 in the meta. Might be a little bit lower, might be a little bit higher. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But in general, like, Lost Zone Tina, we know about Lost Zone Tina. We know how it works. We know what it beats. We know what it doesn't beat. If I have to sit here and explain it, that's a little bit weird. But I think Lost Zone Tina would be really, really good if Miraidon wasn't so big, because Miraidon can be a little bit tough, especially like if they can go hands, and then they could go like Raichu, blow up your Tina, and then just hands again. Like, doesn't seem that great. But in general, like, I think Lost Zone Tina is probably okay. Roaring Moon or Ancient Box. I think Ancient Box is another tier 2 deck, right? Ancient Box was definitely slept on hugely going into NAIC, and we did watch Zach Lesage do well with it. He did win his stream game with it. Now, Ancient Box, it didn't really hit any like amazing accomplishments over at NAIC, but I still think it did really good. And in general, it definitely came out of a place that not a lot of people were looking at it, right? So I think it's, in general, just good that it does well. It takes some decent matchups, a lot of 50-50s, but like, your Guardian matchup being good is really good. Your Lost Box matchup being good is really good. And both those decks are super popular right now. Turbo Hands, if it gets popular, might be a little bit scary, but I think you're still probably okay. Dragapult might be a little bit scary. And in general, like, there's a lot of decks I'm a little bit spooked of, but I think that Ancient Box is probably really solid coming into this next event. Now, this is Raging Bolt Ogerpon. I don't know why it didn't format properly, but it's supposed to be Raging Bolt with Ogerpon. I think it's another, like, probably fine deck. It's probably tier 1.5. Your bad matchup of Gardevoir is horrible. You don't really like to see that. But, like, in general, like, you got a good Dragapult matchup, good Miraidon matchup, good Arceus matchup. Your Ancient Box matchup, pretty tough. I think that, like, your Lost Zone Dragapult matchup is probably fine too. I think it's still like a tier 1.5 deck, probably close to the bottom of tier 1.5. I think if you're playing Super Beat Stick, Miraidon just might be better just because it can abuse that Iron Hands. But in general, like, I don't hate Raging Bolt going into this format. Okidogi's a deck I'm like, yeah, it seems good. There's a lot of utility to it. We've still got Dark Patch. We've got that new Mochi that allows us to do more damage. I think in general, like, it could be a really good deck, and we will probably see that Mochi start seeing a little bit of play over in Ancient Box. I think Okidogi's probably a tier 2 deck. I wouldn't say it's, like, great. I wouldn't say it's bad at all. I think it's probably, like, middle of the pack, like, solid deck, but is it going to win Worlds? Maybe not. And that's kind of the same thing I'm looking at with Regidrago, is, like, the deck is good. It did get top 16 at NAIC. That was a really cool story. And I have a hate for Regidrago, just because for my first 4 regionals of this season, and, well, last season as well. So Toronto last year, I hit Regidrago, and it eliminated me from day 2. Pittsburgh, I hit Regidrago round 2 playing Miraidon, and that was unfortunate, and I just lost that game. It was just a brick fest. And then I hit Regidrago in Peoria. I did beat it there, but it was kind of a, like, it wasn't great. And then I also hit it in Charlotte, which was absolutely insane, and it did stomp me. I was playing Rapid Strike to Charlotte and Peoria, and in general, like, just using Goodra to just go, yeah, take less damage, take less damage, take less damage. It wasn't ideal for me, and I did lose all those games. So, like, I dislike Regidrago, but I have to admit it is looking pretty good. Kyurem is going to make it even better, especially if your Gardevoir does not bench something like a Manaphy, or if you can get that Kyurem really early, kill all their Curlia. I like that. I think Regidrago is looking really good. Your matchup spread's not too bad either. You can use Noivern to get rid of Ancient Box. They might, depending if Regidrago gets too popular, Ancient Box might have to start playing Koraidon again, just to get that shred attack. But, like, is it really worth it to tech it for Regidrago? I guess we'll wait and see. And then we do have this Sablezard deck list. I think Sablezard is probably okay. Probably not great. There's so many ways to play Sablezard. You've got Sablezard Moon, Sablezard Hands, just regular Sablezard. I think it's probably like a tier 2.5 deck. I think just regular Lost Box is so much better, and it's also going in that tier 1 here. It is a little bit scary for decks that might play Kyurem like Regidrago, but I don't think it'll be too popular, right? And like Lost Box, well, we saw Andrew Hejic put on an absolute masterclass at NAIC with it. In general, I think that Lost Box is probably really, really good going into Worlds, and I would not be surprised if we did see a Lost Box win. And one deck that I think a lot of people might be sleeping on is Sir Hands over here. I'm really big on Hands going into this next format, like really, really big on it. Just because Dragapult is getting bigger with that Lost Zone engine, just because our Gardevoir and Lost Box are both really big. Raging Bolt is starting to drop a little bit. I think it might be the time for Iron Hands, like Future Hands. I have said that I dislike Future Hands a lot in the past, but I do think it's probably looking really good for this event. I am putting it in tier 1.5. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate on that. I know, yeah, you're losing to Okidogi, but like your Ancient Box matchup is fine. I think your Lost Tina matchup is fine. There's so many matchups that I'm like, this just doesn't seem like it's a bad deck to be playing, right? Some of the more rogue decks, like here we've got like Banette, it's probably fine. Espathar's probably fine. Kingdra's definitely fine. Sablezard's definitely fine, right? Just hard to look at Future Hands and not be like, this seems like a good play for Worlds. And actually, if I were going to Worlds, it would definitely be on my radar to play. Another deck that is definitely on my radar to play is Pidgeot Control. I think Pidgeot Control is probably a tier 2 deck. There's a lot of tier 2 decks, but like tier 2 decks are like, I could see them top 8ing. I don't think they're going to win, but they could top 8 it. They could do pretty well. And Pidgeot Control is kind of just one of those decks, right? In general, I think Pidgeot Control, if it's piloted well, is really strong. Zerosic is obviously going to make the deck stronger. You do like Miraidon if they can set up fast enough. It's a little bit scary. I think that this Okidogi deck might be a little bit scary for you. But I think like Pidgeot in general, it's probably okay. Probably a pretty good play. I think Control is strong right now, obviously. So for that reason, I'm putting it over in tier 2. Dragapult Charizard is... I don't know. Dragapult Charizard feels like better Dragapult. But also kind of worse. So I think it's kind of just going to go in with the tier 2 here, where it's like, play it if you want. It's probably not like amazing. I think it's got the flexibility of using Charizard. I think if you're gonna play it, you should play it like Tor did, where he played like thin Dragapult but heavy Charizard. I think that's very, very good. Yeah, I think like just basing it around Charizard, and Charizard I think is going to be really good going into this format, and I did forget to add Charizard to the tier list, so I will add that in a second. It will be in the rest of the video. But we do have Lost Zone Raging Bolt next, and I think Lost Zone Raging Bolt might be sleeper deck of the whole format. Your matchup spread is pretty good, right? And it solves a lot of the issues that Lost Zone Box has, where it's like, yeah, just like, I think it's actually just better than Sablezard. You can use Professor Sada's Vitality, you can blow up the big problematic Pokemon, you can still abuse Iron Hands, you can use Slitherwing to knock out any electric types that might be giving you a struggle, but in general, like, Turbo Hands is pretty free. If Ancient Box gets big, you just start playing Cobalion to start knocking stuff out. Like, I think it's really, really well positioned. You take a good Gardevoir matchup, you take a good Lost Box matchup, you take a good... Well, Miraidon's iffy, but you do take a decent Miraidon matchup, you take a decent decent Raging Bolt matchup. Turbo Hands is pretty good. Pidgeot Control is really hard. But like in general, I think the deck is well positioned, right? And that's not even me milking it. I am only putting it in tier 2.5 because like, it's Lost Zone Raging Bolt. Nobody's going to play it anyways, but I think the deck is sleeper pick of the format, and I could see it doing really well at the World Championships. But a deck I could not see doing really well is Lost Zone Goodra. Deck's just a little bit too slow. I just don't think it does enough right now that it warrants playing it at all. Like, your matchups aren't that great. Like, looking at this meta, I'm like, I don't know how great Goodra would be. Probably loses to Turbo Hands. Probably loses to Raging Bolt. Gardevoir probably doesn't seem great. Like, there's just so many matchups. I'm like, I don't know how great that is. Moonspark's probably not great either, just off the fact that I think Ancient Box is so much better. Especially with this new Mohi, that as long as we're poisoned, we can do an extra, I think it's 40 damage, 30 or 40 damage. We're doing some more damage anyways, and I think that's probably all you really, really need. You can take in like one card and you have infinite switches, right? Like, I don't actually know how to say bro's name, but he poisons you and you can switch, whatever. It's pretty cool. We already talked about Turbo Hands. I don't know why it's on here twice. Lugia's... I'd love to see Lugia be good so much. I don't know how Lugia did bad. It is like... I think it's a tier 1 deck. I think it's so good. But like... How did it do bad at NAIC? I don't get it. Your Lost Box matchup, in theory, is really good. Your God of War matchup, in theory, should be okay. Just don't know why Lugia is doing bad right now. I think it's a really good deck still, probably still tier 1. If people start sleeping on it, that's when it'll do well. And that's kind of the same thing with Chien-Pao, where Chien-Pao is not tier 1 at all, but it might be a good, solid tier 2 deck. There's a lot in tier 2, actually. I never realized how much was going to be in this tier 2, but I think tier 2 is like... These are all good decks, and like this meta right now has so many good decks, it's actually nuts. So for that reason, I am putting Chien-Pao like high tier 2. I think this order at tier 2 is maybe Ancient Box needs to come up a little bit. I think probably there. I think this order at tier 2 is probably fine. Pidgeot Control feels really good. And Chien-Pao, like, you blow a lot of stuff up. You can use Radiant Greninja, so that's okay. Your God of War matchup is probably fine. Your Lost Box matchup is fine. Lugia is probably pretty good, right? It kind of depends how they set up or how their deck is built. But like Miraidon's really pretty brutal in general. I think like the deck is well positioned, probably high tier 2. Alrighty, so Charizard, I'm kind of thinking is another tier 1.5 deck. I think Charizard has proven that it is back. I think it's actually probably back in the top like 5, top 6 decks in format. Probably around tier 1.5, like around the middle of it, right? I think it's really good. For that reason, I am putting it in tier 1.5, but this is what we're looking at for the tier list, guys. Let me know what you guys think down below. We'll come back, we'll take a look at it later. We'll see how wrong I am, how right I am. Let me know any feedback you guys have, any questions you might have in general. Until next time, I'll see you guys later.
Want to support the Shuffle Squad? Be sure to check out all of our sponsors in the description to pick up Pokemon TCG singles, sealed, and PTCG live codes. You made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching this entire video from the Shuffle Squad. Honestly, from the bottom of our hearts, we appreciate each and every person that supports our content, watches what we have going on every single day, every single week, even from time to time, and continuously allows us to have a forum to project our creative content towards the Pokemon TCG community. So if you haven't already, be sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and even leave a comment to help boost the YouTube algorithm. That being said, we'll catch you with our next video. Thanks again. Take it easy.